Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, I want to talk about, of course, one of the most classic Gnostic teaching, actually television series, which still holds very fresh today, is the Prisoner TV series from the 1960s, starring Patrick MacGoohan, coming off of Secret Agent Man, a big hit at that time, as all these kind of spy things were after James Bond hit the movies. James Bond bred numerous different spy shows and movies and everything else, like Flint, Max Helm, and so many other ones. There was a great thirst for this, which there wasn't really enough of these kind of films made out there. So while there's always been a James Bond film, I guess every few years, there was a thirst for rougher, particularly more sexual spy films that Flint and Max Helm were in, starring Dean Martin. Flint starred James Colburn. And these are very fun, semi-farcical films, and have always found their audience. But when we get down to the Prisoner TV series, which is a very limited series that basically how the energies and the Gnostic type energies work out there, is that they actually kind of worked through this particular person, which I believe happens with a lot, just like the Matrix films. I mean, these weren't very good people ultimately. They were people who were damaged, who were in trouble, who were seeking answers. And they then were given this kind of information, and it got to the media. Now, after the huge success of Secret Agent Man, MacGoohan, and of course, Sir Lou Grave, who had his own production company, basically gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted, thinking that no matter what he put out, because of his particular popularity, that he could sell it anywhere, which was pretty true. But one of the problems is that MacGoohan was a very strange, nasty person who was really mentally ill, is my conclusion of him, and really didn't achieve much of anything past this series. He wanted to do good work, but really never could come up with it, and nobody liked to work with him. He somehow was able to demand from people and get away with it, at least with this. But after The Prisoner, his career pretty much fell flat, and he really did nothing after that. And really, like most people, he was empty after giving his particular job to do. Once he did what he had to do, there's nothing else. And this is true of a lot of people. We certainly haven't seen any great work coming from the Wachowski sisters now. After the great work of Matrix, pretty much what they did before that and after that is pretty low-level junk, regardless of how well it's produced. There's nothing overly profound by it. So, they did their thing, and that's it, just like MacGoohan did, who was able to get into this. Now, there's a great misnomer with the, and once I get over this, we'll get into the better things of it. There's a great misnomer that this was all his child, which it wasn't. I think there was 13 episodes, and he only wrote 2 or 3 of them. The concepts for the series was interesting, but he was lost after that concept. He had to get help from an awful lot of people to write a bunch of scripts, which are all excellent. So it wasn't really his baby anyway at all. The concept was very good, but you have to remember that everything in life, but particularly with TV shows and movies, you have literally hundreds and hundreds of people, 500, 600, maybe 1,000 people when a film is totally completed that's handled it. This can be from somebody who just gets the actors there on time because they're drivers, to the people that are feeding them during the day, to all the editors, the sound men, the people who picked where do you film, what site do you use. And, nothing really came from MacGoohan. He picked that interesting site where it was filmed because Secret Agent Man filmed there. He didn't find it. He wasn't directed there. Some scout for the original Secret Agent Man series found that cool hotel and went there. So it had nothing to do with him, just as the concepts weren't there. I mean, a person who couldn't be less suppressed and who had a very free life was Patrick MacGoohan. So, and of course, we're talking about the 1960s here, and compared to today, that was like living buck naked free in the world compared to the oppression and tracking we have today. So he was on some sort of personal rage. He was an alcoholic. He treated people horribly. All the things that he thought that things would be better. And his concept of free will was, he'd like to take your money and do whatever he wanted with it. So that was his concept of free will. But he wasn't willing to put any of his time or money into much of anything. His career is pretty lackluster, and nothing really happened from it. He made crappy movies after that. I remember in the, I guess it was the early 70s, because of The Prisoner, going to see the Moonshine Wars. What a piece of trash that was. But that was the only movie role he could get. Nobody wanted to work with him. He was nasty. He made his final fame by working with a guy that apparently he got along with, Peter Falk of Columbo fame, and starred in Columbo in 4 or 5 episodes. And Peter Falk, again, because the series was so successful, was able to have a lot of control over that series and tried to do things better. Certainly, MacGoohan never did any of that and never really put out anything. And with all the years he had to reprise The Prisoner, make some more final statements, he refused to do it because he didn't want to bother with it. They wouldn't pay him to write a script, which is not how it's done in Hollywood, generally. You generally write something and then you show it to people and they say, okay, we'll produce it for you. And then they give you money and you can rewrite the whole thing or whatever. He didn't want to do that because he was an arrogant, nasty guy who pushed his way through everything. He was pretty psycho. He had all sorts of sexual problems. Didn't want to kiss on filming. This guy's a very disturbed person. So, and all the way around. So he did come up with this concept of wanting free. His free will was to dominate other people so he could be drunk and nasty to them. And this is an unfortunate fact, and I've read a couple of biographies on him. And if you want more information on him, do check that out on my channel. I have 2 long videos discussing his life coming from unbiased sources there, and just kind of repeat it. Because there is a book on him written by someone that goes through his life. And no matter how you want to try and make this guy look good, he wasn't. And that's just the reality of it. Now, getting back into what this turned out from many people and the genius writers that were around then. Of course, he did steer the ship to a certain amount, and he tried to do different things. But he was very hollow. He didn't have much to say after a few statements. So once he made a few episodes, that was it. But you can't have 2 or 3 episodes in a series. Technically, you're supposed to make, at that time, in the 60s, you're supposed to have at least 12 to 20. Generally, a season is 24 episodes back then. And he only could get out 13, and some of those episodes he put out were just very, very odd. But in terms of the fact that there was just silly. He made a Western-themed one. I'm not sure that had anything to do with it, but it was extremely well done. The series, not because of him, but because a lot of other people that were working there, from actresses to directors to everyone else, that he used to drive insane. It's amazing we got the product out of it. But that's what happens when you get a good group of people together, and for some reason the magic did click on this. Now, what I like about The Prisoners, again, this relates to your life. That takes you through kind of stages of life. It shows you how you really can't trust anybody and how everybody's a traitor. Well, that's very interesting, and I don't think that concept has been dealt with very well in other places. But everybody was against him. He had absolutely no friends or anything else. That's very Gnostic, and to understand the fact that you don't have any allies. You are a superior being living a bunch of cockroaches. He also went into all phases of life to a large extent. He did, of course, ignore things pretty much, and, of course, stayed away from anything that had sex in it. Of course, that's not, he was afraid of that. But he did do a fantastic episode, and I don't believe he wrote that, on voting. That showed how voting is a fraud. And remember, this is in the late 60s that this is done. Now, of course, he had a huge budget. At the time of that filming, and even going up to today's standards, it was the most expensive TV film series ever filmed. And there were some amazing things that happened, like the big giant guardian balloon there that attacks people. This was done by a mistake. They had something else built that didn't function right. So, all the pieces came together. And, of course, you had a great cast of actors there that he drew on. And of course, they didn't get into the way of torturing people that happens. So, they always emphasize the fact we don't want to damage him. Of course, that's a convenient way out as well. They did use some drugs on him and other things, and certainly his personal rage against I don't know what, he pretty much had a charmed life, came through in this series of raging against the system, which so many people, of course, were into back then. So it's certainly, and every single episode that I remember had some very profound aspect to it. Now, again, this is readily available. You can get these used out there, and they are on Blu-ray now if you want to get them. I don't know if there's commentaries with them. I don't have the Blu-rays on those. I doubt it. But this is, another very classic, and it does kind of relate to your life here and now. The one thing about the setting he picked is it's kind of a setting that always will seem to be of here and now. If you film in an old building or a building reminiscence of a particular time and place, well, that's always going to. So if you film in a Art Deco type building, you're going to think of the 1920s. So the whole idea, since this was kind of an odd, semi-futuristic place, you can watch this, and since they wore kind of uniforms, this is as fresh as it was, what is that now, 50 years ago? So the whole idea is that, and the subjects there are very fascinating, and there's something to look at, and the endings, that went there, the filming, the showing the kangaroo courts and how things work, and how ultimately when you fight the system, you never really get out of the system. So, and that's how it really ends, which is quite interesting. And how you can never really escape it. No matter what he did, he couldn't really escape it. And of course, these are all very profound. It's very interesting. The dialogue is good. It's well acted. The actors are all good. And there's a fair amount of action, whatever that may be, in the series as well. So, again, it holds your attention. It's not a series that you're going to watch and yawn through any particular episode. They're all interesting. They're all different. And it covers vast aspects. And it shows you how, as the individual himself tries to stay an individual and fight the system, that this is very difficult. And on every single level. So, and which is very true. And again, this relates to modern times. So it isn't set in a fantasy world like, unfortunately, The Matrix is. I don't know how you can look at The Matrix and say this is in any way modern life. All of the sets, everything there is very science fiction. This is not. It seems to be what we could say a more futuristic, when ironically it is what it's always been in this world. And here we are 50 years later, and life is just the same, if not worse, than what was shown here. But you can really relate to it. And you can see how ultimately what happens and the meaning of life is this constant battle against such inferior forces that want to enslave you. And of course, they never really want to deal with you and tell you what's going on. They want to manipulate you and control you. And it's very interesting. And they want to brand you and control you and give you a number, etc., which is, comes down to so many of these concepts, just like the song Brick in the Wall that is out there as well. So these are the type of things, the depersonalization that goes on, and your lack of any kind of real freedom. And of course, the problem is that after MacGoohan did all this stuff, nothing ever happened that had anything of meaning whatsoever. There was a remake of this done, which was really horrible, on, I'm not sure, was it Showtime or HBO or whatever. It was just a terrible, terrible series that was put together, very poorly put together. The actors are all bad. I don't know if you can remake something like this anyway. But if you are, you're going to have to keep to a similar theme. And they set this place in a desert and everything. They were trying to not get caught up in doing the same thing. But the problem is, when you have such a iconic character, the problem is that you really can't make it different. And I think there was a very bad choosing of actors for the remake. And I wouldn't recommend anybody seeing that. I did see it, I watched it, and I think I even bought the DVDs because the only way I could see it at the time. And I threw those away. I'm never going to watch that stuff again. So it's just bad. But every concept of this and the unique location of it and every story was a little jewel. And as I said, he only wrote of the 13 that were made here. I think he only wrote 2 or 3 of them. How much input he had with other things, we don't know. But it did turn out to be a masterpiece thanks to a lot of money and a lot of help. And some steering by him of the ship to keep it on track. But this is highly, highly recommended. And again, you can find this very easily out there on Blu-rays and other areas. So I highly recommend it as something. So again, it takes you through many stages of life, and it kind of shows the human condition. If you're a free thinker, you know, people think they're free thinkers, but they're really not. They like their little corporate jobs. They like to have a place to go in the morning, a place to stay, a fairly easygoing, collect your check reality. Nobody's looking to really face the storm. Nobody's looking to face that tidal wave of oppression that's out there. They're more than happy to go along and give in and look the other way. And that's why the world is the giant poop hole that it is. And people are very influenced by anybody in authority. So this is a series that tells you to question and fight authority. When it really comes down to it, people believe in the iconic nonsense that somehow these are good people, like these UFO contactees, this Chris Bledsoe, who believes that NASA are the greatest people ever, and all the CIA and everybody else are their buddies, and they're going to tell you all the truth. So people are more than happy to buy into that. So instead of informing these groups that contacted him, Bledsoe, he became brainwashed, and they were telling him what was happening instead of him figuring it out or him actually getting information from these actual entities that he had contact with. This basically black project that they manipulated him with. So the whole idea is that, but this is the other attitude that people, particularly people, had during the 60s and 70s in the revolting time, when people revolted against authority. A lot of that had to do with the fact that society, and that's just why there's all volunteer armies almost everywhere now. People revolted because they were blowing your head off. They were murdering you in a war, taking you out of school, taking you out of jobs, and blowing away your 18-year-old children in a war. So people had a gun to their head, and either they were going to sit there and really commit suicide, or they were going to stand up and fight against it. And this is, of course, what happened. And we'd have this going on today, which, of course, finally, people aren't joining the corrupt, evil, loser military of the United States anymore. And this concerns those people in power. But don't think they won't bring back the draft and blow your head off again. And that's the way it'll go, people. So the whole idea is to be questioning that, and there's a reason to question, and that's one of the basic survival, for that matter. They're going to feed you poisons. They're going to destroy your life. They're going to literally murder you and your children for a cause of big business or their own psycho realities to fight in places that have nothing to do with us. So this is what goes on. So this is the lessons you will learn in these episodes. And again, they're very entertaining. These are not in any way philosophical mumbo-jumbo that is boring to watch. These are fascinating. Anybody who's been in a position of being manipulated or being controlled by society certainly will find all of this very fascinating. If you're a person that has no problem going along, well, you probably won't like this. Well, assuming you wouldn't be listening to this in general. So do check this out. It certainly is available. I'm sure everybody can get these things at used on eBay and other places, probably at a good price. There's many different editions of this out there. I think it's out of print, but you certainly can find these things secondhand out there without a problem whatsoever. Watch for more to come.